Over the past month, I've made by far the biggest update ever to my roguelike with Paper Mario inspired graphics. And I've been working on the game for just a bit over a year, and even then, by a long shot, this is the most productive month I've ever had. I'll explain how I did all of this so fast, from turning menus into hubs to adding an incredibly important combat mechanic that I haven't revealed yet at all in any video, and overall this update was absolutely crazy, but did any of this actually make the game better? Well, let's find out. So the most obviously important feature of this update was the new hub world that replaced all of the menus. I've covered some of this in my previous devlog of Soulstalker, but I'll give a brief overview of the changes and let you in on some new stuff as well. So the first thing is that you can now explore a hub area that has cool NPCs and different spots for starting runs, buying weapons, and all of that sort of stuff. But the biggest change is that there's an additional layer to progression. So previously, you gained a currency called souls whenever you played the game, and you could use this to buy stuff which help you climb the run difficulties, right? In this update, now the hub has these gates that have extra achievements that incentivize you to play in unique ways, and then when you complete them, it opens a new section of the hub with more NPCs, cool environments, and sometimes even a chest that has a special reward. This worked really well, and in fact, the #1 piece of feedback from the people that tested this build of the game is that they both enjoyed seeing the new progression system and being able to see the cool Paper Mario graphics up close. The issue was that before you could only experience the art style in combat, and the camera is necessarily pulled back so you can properly see the enemies, so overall this first change was a really positive one, and it's also the only one in this video that I've previously covered, so everything from here on out is completely new. Another substantial addition that I made was to the game's map system, and is this the huge combat feature I mentioned near the start of the video? No, that one's coming, but in case you're not familiar with the game's map system, runs have maps that you progress through with choices sprinkled throughout. So for example, some of the choices you may have to make are whether you want to go for a weapon shop or a trinket shop. Or another set might be whether you want to heal up at a campfire or go for a mini boss for extra rewards. And so there are a few nodes that already exist, like the ones that I just mentioned, but I added one new node in this update that adds so much, and it's actually stupidly simple, and I kind of accidentally already had it in an old version of the game, but I removed it. And so I mentioned that you can choose between weapon and trinket shops, right? Well, originally the shop was just one unified one, where it showed you both trinkets and weapons. I split it into two in a previous update because players felt that getting showed weapons when you already had your loadout decided was kind of annoying, right? But then they still wanted to have the ability to pivot your weapon strategy in the middle of the run, so splitting it up served all of these issues at once. There was still one problem though, and that was that it was possible to not get served many trinket shops or weapon shops if the level generation went against you, since sometimes you have to choose between a shop and a mini boss, and maybe you just choose the shop many times and it just serves you the trinkets or the weapons. So the solution to this is, wait for it, adding mixed shops, just like what I originally had. But because the mixed shops that show both trinkets and weapons are now an option on top of the weapon or trinket shops, it complements the game much better. The map system saw a subtle but impactful change in terms of its combat mechanics, as I just explained, but I also added tons of new environments. And I touched on this a bit in my previous video, but here you can see some snippets of the new areas which I think are way cooler than the old ones that the game had before. And another thing that I haven't shown yet is that when you do the new type of run, which are called the job runs, which is like the shorter ones, the map is now themed according to that job's location. So this is what the dusty area map looks like, and this is what the snowy area one looks like, and you get the point. I don't have to show them all, but there's about 7 of them. So these are very subtle changes, but they really contribute to the visuals and the feel of the game. One major addition to the game that I think many people are looking forward to is the new character. And you might be thinking, is this the new combat edition that I teased near the start of the video? Again, no, that one's coming, but before I get to it, I want to explain what makes this new character stand out. And firstly, it's the first of the Kickstarter backer designed characters, and its unique mechanic is extremely cool. So the backer basically tasked me with making their special ability related to fire, but I didn't want to come up with like some boring damage over time ability, because that already exists in the game in the form of bleed, and so I came up with a unique effect called the new blue fire status effect. Basically what it does is if you hit an enemy inflicted with blue fire with a melee weapon, it double hits. Pretty simple, right? Well, all the characters can make use of the status effect with the right weapons and trinkets, but the new character, Gobble, isn't limited to just one hit, or a triple hit, or a quadruple hit. The multi-hits themselves can actually trigger multi-hits. So it's super nuts. It basically forces you to stay super close to the enemies, and you get this like insanely fast burst of damage, and with the right melee weapons it makes them look like some sort of crazy powerful ninja, which I think fits really well since they wear a kimono. And speaking of blue fire, this update has a bunch of weapons and trinkets that I added, and some of them are related to the status effects. One of the new weapons, the Direct Blade, is a consistent way of applying blue fire, but the drawback is that it doesn't automatically aim at enemies and instead it attacks in your movement direction. This makes it really powerful with the multi-hit ability because what triggers multi-hit is being applied by the hit itself, but you have to be super careful when you're spacing because of how the weapon aims. Now, one of the new trinkets is called the Animal Skull, and it's not really directly related to the blue fire status effect, but what it does is it allows Bleed to trigger multi-hits, and Bleed has been a status effect that has been a bit underpowered, so this is something that I added to kind of buff it up without fundamentally changing what it's all about. So just getting more options to be able to use the status in an effective way. In total, this update added 3 new weapons and 4 new trinkets, but I won't explain all of them right now. I'll show you how you can read all about them at the end of the video. So this is it, the big combat feature that I was teasing. It's called the Weapon Evolution System, but what does that actually mean? Well, previously you could upgrade your weapons at a weapon shop or campfires by increasing some stats, but because these were made less common with the introduction of new nodes, you couldn't upgrade weapons so frequently. I felt that I needed to increase the power of these upgrades, but just making the stat increases more extreme ended up being a bit boring and didn't change up your playstyle too much. So what I did instead is I gave every single weapon a unique evolution that you can apply in campsites on top of the upgrades that you can already do in shops. These can be quite crazy, so let me show you one example, even though all 27 unique weapons have their own evolution. So the weapon here usually smites enemies with lightning, but then when you evolve it, it covers so much more area because 3 strikes are created instead of 1. Again, every single of the 27 weapons have their unique ones and they're all really different and incentivize different playstyles, so I can't wait for all of you to try it. The last thing I'm going to cover is so stupid. I actually can't believe such a little thing made such a big difference. And so basically the game's file size before this update was about 1 GB, and after adding the hub, the new environments, and all of the other new stuff, how large do you think the game is now? Well, you'd assume it's substantially bigger, right? Well, it's actually 770 megabytes. And so basically what I did is I changed some key settings, and if I hadn't done that, the game would have been 3 gigabytes instead because of all the new additions. And in short, the game basically has tons of characters, and each character has tons of frames of animation, since we wanted to make sure that they all flowed nicely, right? It makes sense. Well, it turns out that the compression systems were completely off, and in changing that, each frame went from 4 megabytes to just 213 kilobytes. So, yeah, big difference. This was an absolutely insane update, and you know what's the best part? It's that it's all right now for everybody to play on the public branch on Steam, and you can get the game for just $5, which is just such a steal for how many hours of content there are, and you can get to follow the game's development in early access as I make more of these devlogs. So yeah, click on the first link in the description to get the game, and there's also a post on the Steam page that shows you an incredibly detailed list of every single change and addition in this update. And if you like the game, I would super appreciate it if you left a review, because that helps so much in boosting the game in Steam's algorithm. That's it for this week's devlog, and I'll see you all next week to showcase how I added a whole new level to my other game, Wanted Shadows. And in the meantime, watch this video to see exactly how I created the hub world that I covered in this devlog.